First impressions matter, and one look at this leverless controller will tell you that this brand sets quality and aesthetics on high priority. Today we're going to take a look at the DOIO Hitpad Standard. Let's find out if the beauty of this controller goes beyond the surface. Quick thank you to KeyMonkey for sending this over to me. They didn't tell me what to do or say, so all opinions are my own. The DOIO Hitpad runs on a GP2040 firmware. Those of you who know what that means are aware of its capabilities already, and if it means nothing to you, don't worry, I will explain all of that later. I want to start by talking about the aesthetics first, because for this leverless controller, the way it looks is a big key feature and an important part of its story. I've always felt that leverless controllers are a close cousin, if not a full-on sibling to mechanical keyboards. MX and low-profile switches made for keyboards are already hot swappable with our leverless controllers, and we're seeing a growth in the variety of layouts and button counts, which is a big part of choosing a keyboard. We're at the point now where most of these controllers, just like keyboards, pretty much do the same things under the hood. The main differentiator and innovations coming out of both the keyboard and leverless world these days is in the build and aesthetics. This brings us right back to the DOIO Hitpad. It seems like their design philosophy for this controller was do what we do with our keyboards but on a leverless, and to that end they succeeded big time. The matte finish CNC aluminium top plate sits on an acrylic chassis. Many leverless controllers are built with the acrylic sandwich style these days, where you can see the layers deconstructed. It is possible to see the guts of this controller too, but it's housed in a precisely cut body that makes it feel premium and harder to copy. As for the aluminium faceplate, you guys know I'm a big fan of aluminium, and this is the first one I've used that is anti-grease. That's because of the heavily matted texture keeping the hand sweat away to ensure it remains attractive. The edges have a pronounced curve, and this gives the controller an appearance of having a smaller footprint and an element of cuteness to the overall look. The edges are slightly chamfered on all four sides, and along with the dipped bordering around some elements and engraved logo, adds a sense of depth to the face. I think the engraved brand logo is especially cool and looks great from every angle. Now I want to show you something really fun. Check out the base. The acrylic is transparent with a light touch of frosting, and like every decision they've made so far regarding the looks, this was a calculated design choice because of this. The DOIO Hitpad has downward facing LEDs. It fires off a diffused RGB light show that looks great whether you're playing on the desk or on your lap. Of course, a GP2040 Wiz can probably customize this lighting to suit their specific desires, but the included presets that can be cycled through already look great in my opinion. One interesting touch is that the direction and function buttons fire off a white light when pressed. Last thing I want to mention regarding the aesthetics is the color. I really like the mustard yellow on this, and I've color corrected this section of the video so you can get a better idea of how it would look in person. There are plenty of colors to choose from, and I'm glad KeyMonkey were able to send this one to me because it looks amazing amongst the usual black ones that I have. I do like black, don't get me wrong, but a splash of color here and there keeps it fun. This is a 16 button controller, which isn't that daunting if you remember that it's just the usual 4 direction buttons, 8 action buttons, and then an additional 4 customizable ones for things like drive impact if you're playing Street Fighter 6, or WASD fans can have their jump button up here. Be careful what you bind to this button if you use your right thumb for the X button because it's easy to graze during a sweaty session. It's best to bind something low commitment to this like parry instead of drive impact. The keycaps are made with injection molded polycarbonate, and because of the spiral texture on the surface, they catch the light in a similar way to vinyl records and look great from every angle. The action caps are 22mm and the jump button is 25mm. They have an interesting sensation on the fingers, kind of like a gentle scratching, and I quite like the feeling. The keycaps are good at fighting grease, but sadly they catch and hold onto flaky skin if you have dry hands like myself. A good blowing on the odd occasion will fix this. Most GP2040 controllers haven't really nailed these function buttons. They usually range from awful to satisfactory. The ones here sit in a tight pocket with next to no wobble, and I would say they're about as good as it gets for the function buttons on a GP2040 controller. The great thing is they've printed legends below them, which is exactly where I prefer it, and because you're unlikely to add art to this, it's nice to have them labelled. For PS5 players, you'll notice there's no touchpad button, so I'll show you how to replace the useless turbo button later in the video. Moving on, we have 2 USB-C sockets, one up top here and one on the side. It doesn't come with an angled USB-C cable, but so far it hasn't disconnected on me, even whilst playing on my lap. In my experience, angled cables are far more reliable, and it's a little bit disappointing that DOIO didn't choose to go with them for this release. We also have an EXT port on the side for authentication devices like the Brook XB3 for Series X and the super low footprint Booter 5 for the PS5. These dongles will allow GP2040 controllers to work on your current gen consoles. For my OCD bros, if you look at the action buttons too long, you will notice a larger gap here between the medium kick and hard kick. The jump button is dead center, and both the screen and last function button is 35mm from the edge of the controller to frame a neat cluster. Now let's talk about what's under the hood. As I mentioned earlier, the DOIO Hitpad Standard runs on a GP2040 firmware. That means it's compatible with Switch, PC, Mac and PS4. Series X and PS5 will require a dongle. It has several SOCD cleaning modes, so they should be legal in tournaments. The key mapping is customizable, so if any of these extra buttons help with your playstyle, you can choose what they do or just disable them if they get in the way. It has support for RGB, as we can see, and it also has support for this helpful screen. Some people might scoff and ask why it's necessary to have a screen when you rarely look down at your controller whilst you play, but trust me, they're great for setting things up, status checks, and fun to customize too. It's one of those things that I miss when I use a controller that doesn't have a screen. I just want to confirm that the controller works fine with the latest GP2040 firmware. After getting the firmware file, put the controller into boot cell mode by holding the boot button at the back of the controller and plug it in. The screen won't come on, but the controller will appear as a separate drive on your computer. Drag the downloaded file into this drive and wait for it to reset. The firmware will now be on version 7.9, which is the latest at the time of this recording. Also, if you want to use this with the PS5, you might have to activate the EXT port like I did, so that a dongle like the Booter 5 would work. This dongle stops the controller from timing out at the 8-minute mark and tricks the PS5 into thinking that it's a regular licensed controller. To activate the EXT port, hold start and plug the controller into your PC or Mac. The screen will show that it's in web config mode. Type in the IP address in any browser, then click on configuration and peripheral mapping. At the bottom, turn on the USB toggle and change the D+ setting to 26. Click save at the bottom. Now the EXT port is activated and will accept a dongle like the aforementioned Booter 5 or Brook Wingman. I recommend the Booter 5 because of the amazingly small footprint, and you can find a link to this in the description below. If you're on an older version of GP2040 like version 7.7, you might also have to turn on PS pass-through in the add-on page and change the PS4 mode to arcade stick in the settings page. One more optional thing you can do as a PS5 player in the web config is to change the mostly useless turbo button into a touchpad button for training mode. Click the configuration drop down and go into pin mapping. I recommend leaving profile 1 alone so you can go back to it if something breaks. Click on profile 2 and in the top right corner choose PS4 in the drop down menu so we can get the correct input names. Change pin 21 to touchpad and check that you're happy with all the other assignments on this page. You can just press copy base file as well if you're happy with the default setup from profile 1. If you need a reference for what you're mapping, click the pin viewer button, then press the button you want to map on the controller. The configurator will tell you which pin you just pressed, so now you can hit the drop down menu on that pin and choose what you want it to be. When you're happy with everything, click save at the bottom. Finally, go back to settings, click on gamepad settings, choose profile number 2, click save at the bottom. Reboot to controller, and now you're ready to get going on a PS5. As I mentioned earlier, the DOIO pads aren't really designed for art mods. They're immaculately designed to show off as they are, and putting a sticker on this would be a waste of the effort DOIO put into the aesthetics. You can customize your button experience by changing the keycaps and the switches though. The PCB and positioning plate for the switches is made of FR4 fiberglass, which usually looks really good on mechanical keyboards, and that's no different here. Take the time to admire it a bit before covering it up again. I'm not a fan of the stock switches, and I wasn't given any information on what they are, but I'm quite sure they're the standard Gateron red low profiles. They can't be swapped out for KO ones like the wind engines because the pins are in slightly different positions. The cross mounts are also smaller than the KO ones, and that means the button caps from Hope 42 models will not fit securely on these switches. I don't have any Gateron style switches, so unfortunately my Soundtest will only involve the stock ones. By the way, the included switch puller didn't work for me, so I had to use one I already own. And be careful not to scratch the FR4 plate like I did when removing a switch. The DOIO standard model is 128mm long, so not quite as comfortable on my palms as full-sized 300mm controllers. But it's quite wide at 280mm, so it's comfortable on the lap for me because even if I spread my legs out, it still sits in place. And the width of the button spread allows my hands to not feel cramped. The controller is 19mm deep, which is virtually the same depth as the Kitsune and M+. I'm a lap player, and this level of depth is comfortable for me, and it should be fine for tabletop play too. Although that would depend on if you have your desk and chair set up to the correct height as well. It's also heavy for its size at 660 grams, which I enjoy because it doesn't slide around easily and adds to the premium feel. The button caps sit higher than the low profile ones on the M+ and Kitsune, but as you saw from my slide test, it's slidable both with the fingertip and the finger joint. There is a bit of resistance and fatigue when doing it unless you roll your finger slightly to the right like this. On a rating scale, it's better for sliding than the R16 and just below the M+. Whilst the acrylic chassis and FR4 plate look great and are incredibly high quality, they contribute to a sound signature that is hollow and clacky. As with the keyboard world, sound and feel is down to preference. I'm usually a fan of focky sounds, but for once I might lean into this and look for some switches that enhance the clack. During my playtest, I had one instance of a button getting stuck. I don't think this will be a common occurrence because I wasn't able to recreate it, but I would be doing you lot a disservice if I didn't at least mention it. I will update my pinned comment if this happens again or if it becomes a regular thing. If you're looking for a leverless in this size and you have no intention of customizing the art on your controller, I have no doubt that this is the best looking, highest quality controller you can get at this price point. It runs on a GP2040, so it does everything you would expect it to from a modern leverless controller, and the fact that it has an EXE port will make compatibility problems a non-issue. Most leverless controllers with native PS5 compatibility come at a premium cost, but not always premium quality. The DOIO comes at a price below the mid-range, with money left over for a boot of 5, keycaps and switches to experiment with. The biggest considerations for potential buyers will be their opinion on the aesthetics and if the sound signature is to their liking. It won't be my personal daily driver because I prefer larger models with a palm rest, but if I'm attending locals or going to a friend's house for some fighting games, the DOIO Hitpad Standard is the controller I'll be reaching for. Thanks again to KeepMonkey for sending this over to me. If the DOIO Hitbox Standard looks good to you, check out the links in the description. The naming conventions are different because it's known as the Hitpad Standard in the US, and in China I think this model is the KBGM H04. There are variations in the models and which buttons they have, so please do your research carefully if you're planning to buy one. I appreciate you dropping by today. Hit the like button if you found the video helpful, and if you want to see my review for an interesting split layout controller, click on this video.